I don't think so. I think they're a good addition to what already exists, especially in the face of the big needs for Asian development infrastructure and everything. If other countries can join in and add more money to help those countries, I think it's a very good thing. Um, in reality, we don't really know how those new structures are going to work. They're still very new, and so we don't really know what their mode of governance will be, what kind of help they will give. So it's still too early to say how it would help or not the region. Again, it's difficult to say. I think that there has been a lot of discussion about the AIIB in particular because this is a something very new. China taking the initiative of building a new institution, and everybody's expecting a lot from it. I think the Chinese themselves have been a little bit surprised of the overwhelming reaction, especially from the European countries. And now they're trying to adjust because probably the new AIIB with all those different countries, I think there are 60 or 50 members, it's probably going to be different from what they had envisioned at first. And so they're going to have to adapt to the demands of all the member countries now. So I think we will probably see some projects under the AIIB, but from the Chinese perspective, it will be more comfortable and more familiar to them to use other banks, just like the Exim Bank, for example, that has been working on 8 projects in the developing world. Um, so it's going to be a combination. I don't know if they are going to work together or in parallel. Again, we need to make sure that we follow the developments a little bit more closely in the months and years to come. Well, these are two very different questions. I don't really think that the US would benefit from joining the AIB. They already have a lot of tools and instruments that they can use in order to help developing countries. And especially now that many Europeans and some of the U.S. allies, like South Korea, join in, they have some ways to know what's going on in the board meetings and so on. So um, I don't think it was a mistake not to join in. It must have been a communication mistake to try to prevent others from joining in, but that's a different question. As far as the Trans-Pacific Partnership is concerned, um, China is not excluded from it. It's just that the standards are not there yet. It's not a full market economy, so it needs to make progress and reforms to first change its own development model, and then to be able to join in the TPP. And I think that a bigger, a more open development, economic development is always a good thing for everybody. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you asked this question because this is my project with the National Bureau of Asian Research, and we've been looking quite closely at all the dimensions of the Silk Road because there are many, many different layers in it. Um, from a Chinese perspective, as far as I can see from my research and from my discussion with people there, I think there are different levels of of concerns. One being just great power politics because the infrastructure network that China envisions for the entire Eurasian region is going to go through um, areas of traditional influence by other great powers, such as Russia in particular, and India as well. So they're going to have to cope with the misgivings or difficulties that those big powers would have related to the Chinese projects. So that's one level of concern. The other one is that this big network that is going to be built is going to go through regions such as Pakistan and Central Asia in particular that are not really stable, or for Central Asia they are stable, but there is a big potential for political transitions after the autocrats are dead, and also maybe some insurgent groups or terrorist or Islamist radical groups that would be against those kinds of projects. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. What we saw is that Pakistan, for example, has decided that they're going to dedicate 10,000 troops to protect the infrastructure projects, including the pipelines that are going from China, through Pakistan to China in particular. So that might be a model for enhancing the security along those infrastructure. And then maybe in the long term, China would also decide that these are too important for China not to take care of them, and maybe some portion of the army will be dedicated to protect those infrastructure. This is right now, it sounds like science fiction, but the PLA reforms that are going on and the downsizing of the armed forces in China might lead to other forms of security agencies that are dedicated for the protection of these infrastructures that are going to be strategic for China in the long run. I think the main difference is that China's development model is so-called no string attached, which means that there are no demands in terms of political good governance or even human rights or environmental protection. So basically, it's more dedicated also to big projects like dams or palaces, presidential palaces or roads or things like that, and not really focusing on the local people. Many of these projects also are built by Chinese workers who tend, after the project is done, tend to stay over and to build new overseas Chinese communities. It is slightly disruptive to the local, traditional merchant network, to the local enterprises, like little small companies like clothing or things like that, because many many products are imported directly from China, and they're very competitive in terms of price and everything. So it's a give and take, because now more people might have access to those products, but at the same time they're slowly destroying the local business network. So I would say it's slightly different. Although China claims that it's not neo-colonialism, it is indeed very much a new way of having access to natural resources that China is desperate for. And although there are no strings attached, supposedly in the end, when you have such a big stake in the local economy and you give some of the money to the local elites, you add to the corruption, and you make yourself indispensable, and there's a risk of over dependence. So even if maybe the intention is not this one, I think the result of those action and that kind of model of development is leading to some problems for the regional countries. And there is also more and more at the local level, again, more misgivings about the Chinese presence in the region. In Africa, there has been some examples of violence against local Chinese workers or or diaspora. Um, so it is also, a cause for tensions locally, um, and probably a cause for concern in Beijing as well. Going back to, how to protect your own citizens and how to make sure that your interests are protected abroad, we might find some new developments and solutions from Beijing sides in the years to come to face that mounting problem. I think, especially in the beginning of the 21st century, um, China's energy security was one of the main drivers for its foreign policy, and trying to get the hold on those resources at the source, and not really um, trusting the market to have access to those resources was the general trend. I still believe that energy security is one of the important topics for China's foreign policy and national security. Maybe maybe not as much now. I think we've come to a point when it is a broader strategy. It's not as much focused on energy per se, but it's more about, regaining China's status, world status, and influence. This is what Xi Jinping calls the China dream of the great rejuvenation of the nation. So going back to a time where China's influence in the region is unchallenged. And I think that is what motivates China nowadays more than, getting a hold on security. Oh, I'm sorry, on the energy resources per se.